Hey, didn't hear you sneak in. You just gonna spy on me, aren't you? I can't hear you if you're talking. That's why you're being so sneaky. Mhm. Me? You can hear me? I can't hear you. Let me check. I might have switched my audio yesterday. No? Hey, Sean, can you hear me? I can't hear Sean either, Mike, so it might be me. Hmm. What is going on? Yeah, I can't hear Sean. I can't hear you, Mike, so it must be me. All right, hold on. Troubleshooting. Sorry, Mike. I made you just assumed it was you. I don't know what is going on. Oh, I'm gonna start over. I'm gonna close it and see what I can do. I'll be back. Hello?
Hey, can you hear us, Ken?
I can hear you.
All right.
Weird. All right. That is odd. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Oh, excellent. Yay.
We got some of that weird static. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, you got a little bit of a crackle, Mike, but
okay.
other than that,
Where's that coming from?
I can hear
Maybe my mic's boosted or something.
you. Yeah, it like sizzles right at the end of everything you say.
I'll try not to say very much. How about that?
No, that's not how it works. It's tolerable. It's not bad. It's just you're sizzling. Well, welcome everybody. We got Mr. Boyd as well. Hello, sir.
Audio.
And who's the cat? Who's the cat? Mike.
That's Arlo.
Hey, Arlo.
Hey, boy.
You better be ready to contribute, Arlo, if you're going to be here.
Yeah, he's way up on his APIs.
How's everyone this fine week? Surviving? Well, we still have a country here in the U.S. We're still surviving somewhat, so I'm going to keep working as long as we have a country and there's work to be done. I'm just going to keep doing it. Alrighty, it looks like we got a few of you folks. I'm gonna do the formalities here just for grab people that are in the video. We're doing the API Specification Toolbox conversation each week, Friday 8 a.m. Pacific time. We just have a GitHub repo that I use to kind of guide the work, but it's really just a conversation about API specifications, trying to figure out ways to increase awareness and demand for the specifications and get more people involved. everything's done here by GitHub. API Specification Toolbox at the home repo, and we've got most of what you, need to get going here. Now the website, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's evolving. We do this. Jesus, excuse me, I can't talk. Do this every week, as I said. We manage everything by GitHub issues, and I can get you on the calendar invite if you want to get a little nudge every Friday. And then we have a variety of repos and whatnot. I'll probably trim this README a little bit now that we've got a website. But you're welcome to submit an issue, start a conversation, take up a project. We got lots of things cooking. The goal is to just try to move as many ball forwards as we can. I'm starting to move everything to a more visual format on the API Specification Toolbox website, just because a lot of people I talk to, are nervous about getting involved on GitHub. So trying to make things a little more visual, tangible, and real here. But moving all the projects here, tracking the specifications, the extensions, the news, services, tooling, different sectors, business verticals, trying to get a wealth of videos published here. And then last night I added projects. I don't have any images for them all yet, but trying to get some of the projects that we've been tracking on moving forward, even beyond the GitHub repo. So with that said, let's open it up. What are you all working on? Anything you guys want to share? Anything cool, notable from the week? No, nothing too exciting.
Yeah, I've got one small thing. So we've got an analyst on deck, and so now for the next month, she's going to write one blog post a week on OAS data points from our database. So the first one, for example, we were thinking was OAS, like out of the banks that are using OAS, which one? What's the other security formats they're using? So, for example, we collect data on who's using MTLS in their APIs, who's using TLS 1.1, who's using even some authentication type protocols. So we've got a list of that. So we were going to just do a blog post just sort of saying, the top 3 that are most commonly used in conjunction with OAS by banks are these ones, and have little charts. So we'll do that for next week because we've got that idea. Then we wanted to do one on OAS around the world, like which regions of the world have the most banks using OAS, and then are they also the same as the fastest growing areas where we're seeing open banking being taken up? Is OAS also being used in those areas? So that will be the second one. But then other ideas, I would hope once we've got a couple out and you see the format, I'd love to get some input on what interesting questions you would like us to ask about data.
Yeah, wow, that's huge. Thank you. Definitely let us know as they come off the assembly line. So this group can amplify, but then we can get the OAS amplifying as well. So those interesting data points. I mean, I think this just talking about, well, one, you guys tracking on it and doing the hard work. Thank you. But 2, telling the story about it and getting folks thinking along these lines will just, I think, help people step up and give you more data and continue the conversation, and we can keep brainstorming new ideas of ways of looking at it. Okay. That's pretty cool.
I think the information about what security people are using in their API documents is going to be really interesting. But also, if we could collect some information on what extensions people are using, and maybe what pain points they're hitting that the specification doesn't allow them to express their APIs fully, or doesn't it allow them to do what they want to do next. Those would be brilliant feedback for us.
Yeah, the pain points are key. I think that that is something I want to keep kind of fleshing out as part of that feedback loop. So I did add Samosa from Ted's to my list to add to the. I'm going to use that schema model for my tracking on extensions. But I think if we could keep creating the feedback loop so that extensions become, I think, at least in my mind, what they're intended for is really that feedback loop for the roadmap, like help people understand, they can use them and they can kind of use them as a relief valve for those pain points, but then tracking on them and using them and then educating people about the ones that exist so they don't reinvent the wheel, and we're reusing each of the vendor extensions, but then just get people really aware that they exist so that they can document and communicate them.
Yeah, I had a note to chat a little bit more about Samosa. We can either come back to that or do it now. Depends whichever you want to do.
I'm fine now. Mark, what else? But I guess let's close up with Mark real quick. So, what else can we do besides amplifying? And once you get your stories written, anything else we can do to help your researcher?
That would be a great point to start. But then once she's found her feet in the first 2 weeks, then it'd be great. I'll invite her to this session, or otherwise I'll invite her. Maybe Mike, she could have a chat with you directly, and then just and try to flesh out some of those. The ones around the pain points, we'd love to get to that point. It'll be something we add to when we're having conversations with banks or with fintech. We can make sure that we've got like a post-it note beside it so that we remember to ask that. But for the first run, it's quants that we've collected. So, but we need to get to a point where we're collecting qualitative data around experiences as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and as we've talked about before, kind of in the similar vein as Samosa is, let's figure out how we can measure these things, quantify them, and then these should become sometimes. Well, I think we got to have the overlay conversation. I really got to push forward that, but some of this data should live as a machine readable format, whether it lives in the OAS, whether it's overlaid the OAS, or whether it's something that's part of an API's JSON or some other index that we can say, this bank who uses this open API has these data points on their open API that apply to the security, the quality, the overall experience, because that's the intention with the API's JSON wrapper for this, is to quantify and measure that experience that's around that. So that's kind of the dimensions, the layers that I want to think about with is you have OAS, you have, I don't know what would come first, overlay or extensions, but overlay extensions, and then API's JSON has the overall wrapping experience. So I want to keep trying to have that conversation as you're gathering this data, be able to measure and quantify in a machine readable format. So I'll share more on that as we progress. Cool, good stuff, Mark. I look forward to. I think getting this stuff collected, getting people aware of it, telling the stories around it will only stabilize and expand it into other industries and make it hopefully in a self-service way. I mean, that's really what I, preaching the choir with you, but for the wider group here is to get other people self-gathering the data and self-reporting and doing your guys' work. So you're not always paying researchers to do it in every single industry and help you scale what you do across beyond just banking. So good stuff.
Thanks. Then the only other thing, just quickly, so what I'll commit between now and next week out of my time is to do a short. I notice you've got a page up on advocacy for the specifications. I'd love to just do something about what the 5 key values of using OAS are. Like, and I'll mine the current content and the working group stuff. But, it's like speeds up development, ensures security can be baked in, all of those all of those benefits, because I'm putting in for some policy consultation papers around how APIs should be brought up with different governments and that sort of stuff. And I'd love us to just be able to plonk in a statement each time that says, and use OAS to describe your APIs because it gives you these benefits, you know?
Yeah.
So, but if there was a draft that we could then pass on here and then that goes through and becomes an official OAI statement, then that would be great to be able to point to.
Well, I think this gets to a little bit so the handful of projects that I have on the table that I'm kind of stabilizing. One of them is white papers. So creating a set of white papers. I think I have the GitHub repo open, but try to standardize some material for that, basically for the front line of all of the specs, not just OAS, but being able to create content, but in a PDF is the ultimate goal of this, but have some standardized, very plain language content that we can use to help people understand, well, what is, and I would even put before OpenAPI async and JSON schemas, prioritize just API, like what is the API mandate? Why does OpenAPI help you there? And I think if we could get more standardized, and I know we'll be talking, Mark, about some of the projects that we're doing as part of the Spec Toolbox and OAS or OAI, but how do we create that content? How do we standardize it? How do we make it retrievable so it can be readily grabbed for other stories, other quotes, as well as used in these white papers? So, yeah, content, standardized content is key. All right. Let's dive into Samosa and vendor extensions, Mike. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, basically, for anybody who's not familiar with Samosa, it's Ted Epstein's proposal to make the definition of extensions machine readable in the same way that OAS makes the contract on API machine readable. I think, yeah, can find the link possibly. It's a proposal from a little while ago that I've not seen it gain much traction yet, but I think it's got tremendous potential to help with documenting extensions, because it's very ad hoc, the way vendors currently document their extensions, discoverability of that documentation in that standard format, but also making them interoperable.
Yeah.
And being able to collect them in one place and aggregate them and search them and do that, and then say, oh, fantastic, Amazon AWS Gateway has this extension that allows me to do what I need. I can go and do that. And Apogee does something similar or whatever. I don't know whether Ted's currently working on it or whether he's got the throughput to work on it.
Yeah, I pinged him to ask him. I haven't heard back from him yet.
Okay. Because one thing that's occurred to me is that we would probably want to extend this proposal to allow for async API as well.
Yeah. Because
it's such a similar specification structure, and the extensions generally work in the same kind of way. So whether that's a case of forking this under the API Spec Toolbox repo, and then maybe PRing it and seeing if Ted's got the time to take it on, or whether he wants to maybe even fold it into the Spec Toolbox.
Yeah, this is precisely, this is exactly the direction I want to be going. One, we're all about all the specs right now, but I'm trying to understand, well, what is an extension that should live in OAS? What is an extension that should live in async? Is there a concept of universal ones that could live in both and mean similar things, but in different implementations? And then, for the toolbox, I'm tracking, extensions are, this uses the API's JSON format as each of these listings, but so I can add Samosa as a type or a binding within API's JSON, similar to JSON schema is part of OpenAPI, and then also part of async API, and just like Open API is a binding within async API. So I'm trying to, understand where this should live, but I want it to be its own kind of standalone spec, and then I will adopt it as part of API's JSON if it lives there, or if it's in the Open API. Because here's kind of where I would like to go with it is use the AWS API gateway is. So I have an API's JSON index of the AWS API gateway, which has an Open API for it, and I want to be able to associate and say this Open API for this API, AWS API gateway, uses these extensions and have that machine readable. So it's so critical, I think, for the search and discoverability. But going back here to the listing. See if we can find AWS's. Here it is. And then really get to work real quickly on the tooling, because as you said, no one's standardizing how they're storing it. So, I'm trying to parse this manually, or I'm scraping it, but grabbing this. And if we could quickly get a next iteration of the spec out with a tool that's like a basic, templating, HTML templating or something, that'd be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I like all of those directions. That's that could help deliver the potential that's I feel is there in the Smosa spec itself.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks for Jeremy. How's it going, boss? Welcome. So that's because that's how I feel everything should operate. There's a lot of focus on OAS as a spec, but I think we need to be having that wider spec conversation. How does this play within async or get baby schedule, huh? Nice. But everyone's too focused on OAS. I went into API's JSON kind of coming out of my universal view of, at that time, in 2013, 14, API Blueprint, Mastery IO docs, Swagger, and then ultimately RAML. And so I had this kind of universal view that, hey, the more specs, the better. But going into 2015, 16, 17, it was clear that, Swagger, now OAS, is gonna win, when it comes to the HTTP 1.1 specs. And then by 2016, 2017, you've got async as a sister spec saying, hey, we need to go beyond HTTP 1.1. But we're back where I saw is I want multiple specs, and we should have a coherent way of reusing across them and thinking, across them, but then applying extensions in an intelligent way. Now, can you articulate for me, Mike? Because I'll be honest, I find it difficult, the relationship of when something should be an overlay and when something should be an extension, and coherently explaining that to folks. So do you have a good explanation that I can build from?
I don't have anything off the top of my head, but generally speaking, extensions are to further the scope of an OAS or async API document. Mm-hmm. So they're things that the specification doesn't currently allow, or doesn't have the flexibility or the depth to express the additional metadata or information that you need, or the additional links out of the specification. Mm-hmm. Overlays are really an authoring tool, as far as I see them, mm-hmm. For doing things like internationalizing mm-hmm. an API description to different languages, to be able to do quick edits to multiple places in an open API description. So you want to fix the descriptions of all the 200 OK mm-hmm. Responses in you can just apply an overlay, and it will just go and blat through the entire document and update all the nodes mm-hmm. that match. Mm-hmm. So overlays are really aimed at touching and modifying areas of the specification that are already in the core of the spec.
Yeah.
rather than the extensions. So it's certainly, once overlays come out of the proposal process, it's certainly storytelling we're going to have to be prepared for, as to explain what the use cases are, how to choose between an extension and an overlay, or a third spec, if neither one will do what you want it to do. Things like OpenRPC is also on the horizon.
RPC.
Yeah, worth a look. It's on GitHub. Yeah, there you go.
Interesting. This one's new to me.
So that's a bit of a side swipe, but it's based purely around describing JSON RPC APIs. So it's got a very tight core focus. It doesn't aim to describe all kinds of RPC APIs, only ones that comply with JSON RPC. But it's, again, like Async API, it started off as a fork of OpenAPI. So there's, it's worth keeping an eye on that, I think, as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll add it to this. So give you a little. So actually, I'll go from here to. So here, I just added this morning. Is the goal here is. And I can't change the color of that spinning box. I cannot find it in the JavaScript. I gotta find it because that pink color is driving me nuts. My goal here is, here's the specifications we're tracking on. I added the ability to add a spec, and there's basically two ways that you can add the spec. Is you can just add it as a YAML document, and if you want to add it, but I don't always have the time to do that, and I want to be able to bookmark things. And so the other is just add it as a new issue, and just get it in here. As far as how do you actually spell that? So it's all one word. I get yelled at so much for putting spaces or not, in the names of things by people so much. I'm always so nervous about that.
Yeah, even the picture on the website with all the OpenAPI stickers, even that grates because it's the old sticker. But we need to get some new stickers out to folks. That would solve that problem.
So I'm just adding as an issue here, and the goal is people can come and click on new specifications, and if someone wants to do some data entry, they can choose to add this, or when I get time, I'll come here and do some data entry and then actually add it to the site. So that's my goal. I'm still working on the language around it, but try to get folks, each of these sections has its own instructions on how to add, so you can go to, if you want to add a new tool, you come here. There's an add or update tool section. So I'm trying to get a little more crowdsourced there. Streamline, easy, harder path, being pull requests and fully update, easier being a GitHub issue. And then I'll probably come up with something in between as well. But anyways, adding to the list. Good to know. Yeah, so that spectrum, I would like to keep talking about that, the overlay and vendor extension. But I would say while we're pushing forward the overlay conversation, and we can work on that language, I think the biggest investment I want to do is around the vendor extensions and get, I'm going to try again the weekend to do a sprint where I'm adding as many extensions as I can, because my goal is I want to be able to click on, gateway, and I want to be able to see all the gateway extensions. I didn't add it, but I want to be able to see all the gateway extensions. And then eventually, I want it associated with the services as well, or the tools. So these services use these extensions, but I'm not looking to get there right away. So.
Yeah, what I see as part of the potential of a machine-readable format like Samosa is being able to import it into your authoring tools or your documentation tools at the same time as an OAS document. And if you imagine your documentation tool knows how to render an extension from Amazon AWS Gateway, so all their extensions around security and operation IDs and things like that, they would all become part of your documentation. They'd be correctly rendered and linked to some template library or whatever. But also with the things like the GUI editors out there, Stoplight, API Courier, and OpenAPI GUI and things like that. if you import a Samosa document with the extensions you want to use, or you tick them from a library, you can add an extension just as easily as you add a path or an operation or a schema.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to be tremendously powerful.
Yeah. Well, and at some point we can start. It's one of the GitHub issues on the ideas on Toolbox is how do we acknowledge which service provider, how much of the OAS spec, okay, so this kind of goes into Mark's world is, okay, so AWS API Gateway, do they use OpenAPI? Do they use async API? And do they use JSON schema or use or support? We'll find the right wording. And then how much of OAS do they support? How many of the objects? Do they support examples? Do they support remote references? Do they support inline versus have a kind of checklist of how robust their OAS support is? But then we can start layering on the vendor extensions and go, okay, do they support this gateway parameter function extension? And then that way, then we can start getting those counts for you and the TSC to be able to go, look, here's sort, all right, here's the most 30 relevant vendor extensions. And we start getting it in specific areas like changelog, gateway, code gen, stuff like that. That's really where I want to get. Yeah, good stuff. It's definitely, I would say now I'm really seeing the API spec toolbox in my head as far as the reasoning why we need to be looking at this cross spec is really trying to understand the what's actually happening in the real world and what we need to bridge across these. Because I think we just really need to start getting more honest and less, somewhat vendor driven, but less vendor ideology, I guess I'll say, around why you should be using each of these specs, when it applies, when it actually makes sense. Oh, that shouldn't be in here. That should be under verticals. But start getting, and I have a lot of roadmap issues around Postman collections to be able to start going, okay, because we auto-generate collections from open APIs. So open API is the truth. We're generating collections, but there's things that live in collections that don't live in OAS, like scripting, pre-request and post-request scripts, workflows, so daisy chaining APIs together. And so there's things that I got to make a decision on. Does it keep living in Postman as a collection? Does it become a vendor extension and get put into the OAS? Because when you're generating, like if you generate your testing collections from an OAS right now, you'll overwrite your scripts. There's no storage of those scripts in the OAS. So I've got a lot of those questions I've got to answer. I got to get a screenshot for Samosa. But I think we got to keep answering these as far as, okay, what's gRPC bringing to the table? And I added, I think, see if it shows up here. I'm guessing I don't have a screenshot for those either. Yeah. Google Registry API and understanding, the relationship between protocol buffers, so gRPC and JSON APIs, like how are they approaching this from a discovery standpoint? So yeah, there's just a lot of things we got to start tackling. So thanks for this, by the way, Mike, because I had no idea Ted was working on this.
Yeah. So what you mentioned there about the Google API registry, I think that's really interesting. If that takes off, the next version of API Guru would probably have a compatible API with that, so people can mix and match between. They could start with a GitHub repo with their open API documents in it, their async API documents, their Postman collections, whatever. And if they want to then move over to the Google API registry instead, they should be able to move data between one and the other.
Nice. I like that. So how do you feel about, one of the things I've been pointing people to APIs Guru, because like Man, my brain just totally blanked. Several different groups I know are doing deep dives onto discovery, understanding what's in the space, and so people forking API's Guru and using it as their own search engine. And so I really want to try to keep doing that, get people. So, I mean, one, at some point, I hope people start contributing back in a more meaningful way to API's Guru, but standardizing it as a forkable open source, not just, hey, it's a destination you go to. Well, it's something you can actually run, and it's interoperable with other registries out there. I think that's a pretty strong feature. So that's good to hear.
So yeah, I've just finished a rewrite, and it's taken off and on about the last 3 or 4 months of all the scripts we use to run API Guru. So now you can basically white box it, white label it, and stand up your own. So hopefully that will drive some improvements in the search experience, things like that. I also dropped into the chat an OpenAPI 3 feature checklist that I inherited from another project. So that I find it's really useful. It could be a good starting point for the feature compliance thing you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, no, this is exactly what I was asking, because this is what I want everybody, all the service providers in the API Spec Toolbox, them to self-select and answer this. And then I want to try to figure out, per OAI discussions, is, okay, how do we get service providers and tooling providers to basically fill this out and answer this? And then how do we get them to self-select and say, we're willing to be part of beta releases, we're willing, and starting to get that front line for the TSC to be able to start having a group of people that they can actually talk to and depend upon and how do we incentivize that? How do we give, if you're self-selecting on this, great, that's one point. But if you're actively working with the TSC, that when something changes or evolves on this list or gets added to this list, that you're that front line of feedback loop on that. And how do we incentivize people to do that? That's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think possibly the one way to incentivize that is amplification of compliant, well, in inverted commas, compliant vendor tools. I think the OAI can, because it's independent of the tooling currently, there's no reason it can't talk about the tooling from all of the member companies on an equal footing.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the carrot that you can dangle in front of these people. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I initially started doing as part of the Spec Toolbox, and I want to continue, is how do we keep a record of 42 crunches participation, as a service provider? How do we track the number of times they tweet something spec related, they write a blog post spec related, and then when they've this is overlays. Where did I lose your list? Here it is. So if they fill this out, they get points. So basically, I want the rating in here and how much they float up to this as the search directory as it grows in prominence. That they have top placement. How do they get ad spots? So they get featured here. And then the amplification, I don't have it built into this yet, is at some point, I want the news to be amplified. I want, things, once we get the newsletter ready to go, we grab one entry from each of these each week and we send out the newsletter. You get prominent placement in that. And so how do we come up with this whole list of carrots that we can give folks and that if they participate in these and we communicate it effectively, that then, and this is what I want to try to solve as far as the OAI, because that's the conundrum that the OAI is in right now, is that they're not effectively talking about the services and tooling. And I think that feeds into the illness that we see with the tooling adoption and the evolution of the spec, that feedback loop. So. Yeah, important stuff, man. I mean, because that's really, I think we got to figure out how to keep that carrot dangling and keep people contributing. And then I want to get, how do we do that at a company, a service provider level, at a tooling provider? But at some point, I want the people directory in here as well, and we have people who are stepping up. And I mean, those of us who have given volunteer hours to OAS or just generally the community understand how hard that is. But how do we get more people or new people stepping up and then sustaining those people as well? So yeah, good stuff. So vendor extensions is one I'm going to focus on pretty heavily over the next week. Try to get the Spec Toolbox, because I really want to see the data across this. How many extensions, what areas that they're in, and then eventually what service providers are supporting those. I don't know how to reflect that quite yet, but I'm going to work on that. So getting the specs in here and getting their extensions is pretty critical to, I think, the next kind of wave of the conversation I want to have with the OAI. So if you guys come across any more, feel free to add it to the issue. There's already an issue for this, but Mike's added a few, and we've all added a couple links. But if you know of good, whoops, it's not it. There it is. Continue adding. No, I'm in the wrong repo. I'm in the Toolbox repo. So yeah, I get all tripped up on this. So don't feel like if you get confused where things are at. I fully understand, and help me understand how I can clean things up. But here we kind of have the list. I'll probably clean this up and add these as individual issues on the Toolbox repo, because what I'm trying to do is try to find ways of giving people bite-sized work. And when someone clicks on something and it's not fleshed out, like, oh, just take all of these extensions and add them, that's kind of a lot of work. Like, how do you tell someone to parse this? Well, this one's not that much work. This one's pretty easy. But still, I want to break things up into bite-sized morsels for people. So, anywho, what else we got to talk about today? Nothing. Let me look at my notes and see. So I'm going to be pushing forward the projects. That's kind of why I added the project listing. Mark, you and I will have, I'd like to check in on your, your storytelling effort that you're doing, but the other emails you sent me, and talk about, basically I'm trying to get this to reflect how we can invest in projects and start prioritizing work and carving up work, and then getting money for that work across the spec organizations and some of the commercial entities I'm working with, Postman included. And so some of the projects that I would like to get, I mean, as part of, so I had my first OAI BGB meeting where Isabella and I are the co-chairs now. And so I'm not pushing any changes or changing the game. We're just kind of learning the ropes and doing what needs to be done, but really queuing up all the projects that we need, and being very observable and out in the open about what projects are there and what we need. We need people, we need money, and then seeing what we can invest in as part of the OAI, but then also invest in as part of async API, JSON schema. And one of the projects I was just adding to this list is JSON schema documentation. So updating the JSON schema documentation for the latest draft, but just making it more usable and an overall better experience. Because this came up as part of OAS BGB meeting from the TSC. Ron brought it up, Mike, and saying that we desperately need JSON schema to be updated. So this is part of, I would say, this group. It needs to be, this cross-pollination between the specs and try to drive things. And I think at a certain point, the OAI can step up, and there was interest among the BGB of funding that. Like, how do we actually pay for that? So I'm working with Ben right now to try to spec out that project, find some resources, someone who could do it, and then get it in front of the BGB for the OAI and get it approved and funded. So that's something I'm working on. But that's just one of the projects. I would love to figure out how do we get some of these other projects fleshed out and actually starting to move forward even without OAI funding, but then have clear details. And if the OAI, helped in this way, then it would do X, Y, or Z. So I'll be working on this pretty heavily over the next week, 2 weeks, because I want to get the project list together. I want to have a single place that I can keep it publicly, keep it observable. But when I do have OAI conversations, I have a single list. I have all the details of the projects ready to go, and we can articulate what's actually needed. And then part of that is also we're trying to push forward the additional leadership capacity proposal for the OAI, is trying to get them to hire some part-time folks, 3 to 5 people, to help push forward some of these projects and other projects. And hopefully we can get them involved in this group in some way so that they're tuned into this. So that those projects, the additional leadership capacity, are pretty high on my list for what we're going to be tackling pretty quickly. Let's see. I know I've got some other things. I'll pause and breathe and let you guys ask any questions if you have it while I'm looking here. Let me see my notes. BGB. Okay, so I'll add these as issues here. I want to work on 2 stories for the OAI blog and submit and see if I can get Marsh to accept them. I've got their community spotlight posts. So one is on Lorna and the work she did around webhooks, and one is on Taylor and the work she's done around the Ask conference. So I'm going to add those as 2 tasks for blog post tasks. And one of the things it's Adam Duvander and I who talked about this, but it applies to you, Mark, is one of the things I want to do with the blog here is come up with an editorial process that when you add a new blog post, it doesn't immediately show up here on the site. It's kind of in a queue, in a holding pattern in the GitHub repo as an issue, and it gets edited, and then we figure out, well, where does this blog post live? Does it go here on the blog, or does it? I got a meeting with Snowflake here. But does it live on this blog, or does it get syndicated somewhere else? Like, what is the thoughtful? So if I write a blog post, I'm going to add an issue saying, hey, I want to write a blog post on Lorna and what she did on webhooks. I'm going to let someone else maybe step up and do the research, or maybe I will. I'll let someone else step up and do the writing, or maybe I will. And then same for editing. And then once it's ready, it's like, does it go here, and does it live on this blog, or does it go? Where does it go as its first step? And then from there, what does syndication look like? And so I want to get more observable and collaborative around writing a blog post. And try that. So if you have blog post ideas, I'm going to be pushing forward with that. I'll just plug several things from the BGB meeting in the meeting in case y'all are interested, or anybody watching by video. The API Specifications Conference is ramping up. And I want to figure out how to weave this more into the site to get more. I think I'm going to add a banner ad for the API Specification Conference. I think I'm going to make one and put it somewhere in here, similar to what I'm doing for Galaxy. So we really need volunteers, people to step up. I'm going to help a little bit, but to be honest, I have event fatigue from running this for when it was API Strat, and I'm just kind of event fatigue. But it's super important, and I want to try to get new people stepping up. Taylor's super amazing in what she does here, so I want to get more people there. I already talked about the additional leadership proposal. there's an email distribution list. That's the OAI that I'm going to look into. So I'm going to do that as part of the newsletter building for this, for API Specification Toolbox. One of the projects we have on the list that I started to move forward and I haven't done much, and is the newsletter. So I don't have a distribution list, but this is the idea of starting to pull together the content for a newsletter, and then I can come up with a distribution list. But I guess the OAI has a distribution list that I think goes beyond the membership. It's just the wider community, and so I may want to piggyback on that and then work with Async API and JSON Schema to see if they have distribution lists, and see if we can't get some better syndication for when we do get this out the door. The goal is I only have the first issue, which I'll probably actually revamp now that I've got the site done a little bit more. But the goal is the newsletter would highlight one entry from each of these sections each week, and try to get the community to step up, curating and championing each week. So you could champion one or more weeks. You would pull together the list. You would choose which of the entries you wanted to showcase, and then you could, I've got OAS 3.1 release, which is aging pretty quickly, but I've got a whole ones that I suggest, and then pull it together and then have a process for actually sending it out as a newsletter. So I'm going to work on that. I think that's all I got for this week. I think that's pretty exhaustive of my notes. We'll leave it there. You guys got anything else you want to add before we close? Got a meeting I got to jump to in a little bit, and I need a bio break in between. So I think I'm going to let you guys go real quick. Mark, we've got our meeting. I want to talk. Mike, I would love to do another check-in with you too. When you have the bandwidth in coming days, just grab me and we'll make some time. And Jeremy, good luck with the baby, and as soon as you can get your children contributing to the OAI, the whole spec conversation here, let me know. We can.
I am working on a book, The Bernstein Bears Learn Open API Schema.
All right, awesome. That sounds like a great contribution. I appreciate it. I love where your head's at too, Bernstein Bears. That's a good one. All righty, you guys. Have a good weekend. Thanks for coming. I appreciate you guys being here. Love seeing your faces every week. Cheers.